Welcome back, guys, to the Myth of Illusions. Now, in continuation of our dark spiritual path that we are on lately, today's topic we're going to be discussing the architecture of domestic ruin, the motives for the destabilization of the family unit by witches and warlocks. The family unit has historically served as the fundamental cell of social organization, acting as a microcosm of the state, the church, and the cosmic order. Consequently, the figure of the witch or warlock, as conceptualized in historical records, folklore, and modern esoteric tradition, is frequently characterized by a singular focus: the systematic destabilization and destruction of this family unit. The analysis examines multidimensional motives behind such targeting, ranging from socio-economic pressures of early modern Europe to the psychological archetypes of Mediterranean mythology and contemporary spiritual warfare doctrines of generational curses. By investigating the interplay of envy, political survival, and theological dogma, one can discern why the occult aggressor is perceived not merely as a threat to individuals, but as a corrosive force aimed at the erasure of lineage and domestic harmony. The domestic order as a microcosm of theological order. In the pre-modern Western world, the family was viewed as a sacred hierarchy, reflecting the relationship between God and humanity. Therefore, the witch was defined primarily by her rejection of this order. The destabilization of a family was not merely a criminal act of the maleficarum, harmful magic, but a theological interaction, the hammer of witches and the inversion of femininity. The publication of the Malleus Maleficarum in 1486 by Hendrik Kramer and Jacob Sprenger provided the theological framework for viewing women as a primary agents of domestic ruin. Kramer's work was saturated with an extreme misogyny that identified women's insatiable nature as the root of their susceptibility to the devil. The primary motive for a witch to target the family, according to this manual, was to fulfill a satanic pact by subverting the very domesticity that defined her social value. Historical depictions of witches often emphasize the inversion of household labor. The broomstick, an everyday object of domestic cleanliness, was transformed into an apparatus of flight and rebellion, symbolizing a woman's abandonment of the home rather than her tending to it. By riding the broom through the night to Sabbaths, the witch was believed to be joining an anti-church or anti-state dedicated to the destruction of the Christian household. The coverture and the legal erasure of identity. To understand the motive of independent witches targeting families, one must consider the 17th century doctrine of curvature. Under this legal framework, a woman's independent identity was erased upon marriage. She could not own property sign contracts, or sue individuals. Witches were often seen as women who refused to conform to these domestic roles, thereby threatening the stability of the patriarchal family structure. Accusations against financially independent women, such as Bridget Bishop in the colonial Massachusetts, served to enforce control over wealth and inheritance, framing the autonomy as a witchcraft that destabilized the local social order. Socio-economic envy and the mechanics of household ruin. Beyond the sociological concerns, the motives for destabilizing a family was frequently rooted in the dark side of kingship. The proximity of envy and competition within small, resource-scarce communities. The Thomas McFarlane model of charity refusal. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. So, sociological research into the European witch hunts suggests that many accusations arose from a feeling of guilt following the refusal of charity. In this functionalist interpretation, a prosperous family might refuse a request for aid from an elderly, marginalized woman if the family subsequently suffered a misfortune, such as a sudden illness of a child or death of a cow. They projected their guilt onto the beggar, claiming she had used maleficence to punish the household for its lack of generosity. Here, the witch's motive is perceived as a vengeful response to social exclusion, designed to humble the proud and prosperous family. The Putnam family and the weaponization of hysteria. In 1692, Salem witch trials provide a definitive case study in how family feuds drove accusations of domestic destabilization. Salem was divided between the wealthy, the mercantile Salem town, and the poorer, agrarian Salem village. The Putnam family, residents of the village, had seen the landholdings diminish and the political influence wane over generations. In contrast, families like the porters and the nurses were ascending in the social ladder. The Putnams, specifically Sergeant Thomas Putnam, his wife, and their daughter, Anne Jr., were primarily instigators of the witch hunt, using spectral evidence to target their neighbors. Their motive was the systematic elimination of political and economical rivals. Anne Putnam Jr. accused 62 people, with the Putnam signature appearing on 14 of the 19 eventual accusations. This was not merely hysteria. It was a calculated attempt to use the legal apparatus to destroy the rival Porter faction and seize control of the village. Biological sabotage, the targeting of lineage and future heirs. The most visceral motive attributed to witches and warlocks is the desire to erase a family's biological future through the destruction of its children. In pre-modern societies, high infant mortality rates and lack of medicinal explanation for sudden deaths created a fertile ground for witchcraft mentality. Lilith and the archetype of reproductive envy. Mythological figures like Lilith, embody the primal fear of an anti-mother. Lilith, Adam's first wife who fled Eden, is depicted as the Mesopotamian and Jewish law as a demon who devours infants and causes miscarriages. Her motive is a deep disdain for the civilized order of the home and the desire to hurt God by destroying his creation at its source, the child. In Christian doctrine, Lilith was often conflated with the Lamia or night hag, a creature that sought to suck the blood of infants to sustain its own unholy existence. Midwifery and the accusations of infanticide. The historical witch was often a woman who occupied the liminal space of the birthing room, while modern research was largely debunked as the midwife as victim myth, showing that midwives were actually trusted agents in the state of identifying the infanticide. The perception remained as a malicious midwife could cause a breath or a touch to wither an infant in the cradle. The motive here was believed to be the offering of an unbaptized child to the devil, a crime that directly targeted the continuity of the family line. Political sorcery and the destabilization of dynasties. When witchcraft accusations moved into the halls of power, the motive was often the destabilization of an entire royal or aristocratic lineage to facilitate a coup or explain a lack of clear succession. The Capetanian line and royal deaths. In the 14th century France, witchcraft trials were the usual way of explaining royal deaths in the direct Capetanian line. Under the papacy of John XIII, accusations of sorcery were weaponized to target political enemies, linking noxious magic with treason. The motive for these accusations was to delegitimize a rival's claim to the throne by framing their sudden illness or death as a result of a diabolical conspiracy. The folklore of domestic testing, Baba Yaga's household. In Slavic folklore, the motive for the witch to target a family is more complex, often serving as a tester of domestic harmony and the virtue of its members. Baba Yaga resides in a hut that spins on chicken legs, representing the boundaries between the workaday world and the magic world. She is not a one-dimensional villain. Her motive is to test those who seek her aid. In the tale, the Facilia, the beautiful, the protagonist is sent by her evil stepmother to test the fire of Baba Yaga in hope that she will be devoured. Baba Yaga sets impossible domestic tasks, capturing fireflies, capturing the winds, and sorting vast quantities of grain. Vasilisa succeeds not through her own power, but because of her late mother's doll, a symbol of ancestral protection and domestic virtue. Baba Yaga's reward for Vasilias is a skull with glowing eyes that incarcerates the wicked stepmothers and stepsisters, effectively destabilizing the dysfunctional family unit in order to restore a more virtuous order. The bloodline as a single spiritual unit. Modern deliverance ministries define a generational curse as a cycle of negative behavior, spiritual bondage, or consequences that pass down from one generation to another. The logic is rooted in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, where God visits the iniquities of the fathers upon their children. The occult motive in this context is the opening of a door to a demonic influence through an ancestral unrepented sin or involvement in sorcery, Satan worship, or other demonic activity. Once a door is opened, spirits are believed to transfer onto children to form a bloodline curse. The motive of these spirits is the indwelling and torment of the family line until the curse is formally broken through prayer and renunciation. So, sociological implications of the anti-family narratives. The recurring motif of the family as a site of occult attack suggests a broader cultural utility for these beliefs. Feminist historians argue that the witch hunts were a brutal means by which patriarchy exerted control over women who posed a threat to male dominance, specifically through the illicit medicinal skills as wise women or rapacious sexuality. Accusations of infant murder and magical sabotage were calculated performances designed to erase communal knowledge and cement patriarchal authority in the home. By criminalizing female independence as witchcraft, the state reorganized society around the needs of capital, recasting women's reproductive labor as a natural obligation rather than skilled work. Critical witchcraft theory, a contemporary satire. The satirical critical witchcraft theory, also known as CWT, posits that witchcraft is a social construct which ensures continued social domination by witches over muggles. In this framework, the motive for witches and to destabilize the social order is to maintain witch privilege and unearned authority that confers exclusivity and preferential treatment. While satirical, this reflects real-world sociological theories that view witchness or marginalization as tools used by powerful groups to label their rival as evil to justify their exclusion or destruction. In conclusion, the analysis of historical documents, folklore, and modern cultural expressions reveal that the family is the primary site of occult attack because it is repository of a community's survival, wealth, and moral continuity, whether through envy-driven accusations of the Putnam family in Salem, the mythological vengeance in the Medeas against Jason's lineage, or the modern spiritual fear of generational curses. The witch or warlock is consistently framed as the force that rends the family apart. This targeting serves to reinforce social norms by labeling any threat to the patriarchal or religious status quo as a diabolical attempt to destroy the very foundation of human society. Ultimately, the reasons for destabilizing a family are as much about the anxieties of living as they are about as the perceived powers of practitioners of magic. Now, if you liked today's video, please do like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.